Hi, dear listeners. You're welcome to the platform again. Now we are continuing the poem, the song of the women of my land. And this time around in this lesson, we want to look at the figures of sounds and figures of speech as seen in the poem. Here I will start with alliteration. We have the cases of alliteration in the poem, and the following lines of the poem contain alliteration. The first line, the first sample of alliteration is seen in line 5 of the poem, where we have they sang in the forlorn field. Forlorn field. We have FF there, which marks an instance of alliteration. Take note of that when reading the poem. And next is in line 8 of the poem. We have for memories of lyrics lost in the vast void of time. Lyrics lost, LL. Vast void, VV. That is an example or an instance of alliteration in the poem. Also, in line 11 of the poem, and the reliction decapitated the epics of their lives. The reliction decapitated DD, as we have there, marks an instance of alliteration. So also in line 12 of the poem, with a song they sponged off their anguish. Song sponged, we have SS there, and that marks alliteration. They, there, that is also the consonant sound as well. And lastly, in line 24, today, the time roam, the forlorn feet, as I've mentioned earlier. So those are the instances of or the cases of alliteration as seen in the poem. The next device is parallelism. Parallelism, I said once before that it has to do with um, the use, the repeated use of a class of speech in any literary writing, precisely poetry. And here are the cases of parallelism as noted in the poem. In line 13, we have to behold their collective pains. In line 14, to celebrate their gains. In line 15, cheat the tyranny of time. When you look at this, we have preposition in common in the lines and also pains games. The first one is to behold, second one to celebrate. That shows the class unit of preposition, and it makes those lines to be parallelism. So those are the two instances of figures of sound as noted in the poem. Now the figures of speech, we have extended metaphor. In line 11 of the poem, this word, dereliction, has the surface meaning of not doing necessary thing at the right time. That is, you are doing something, but something that is done is not at the right time. Probably the time is meant for something else. That is what the surface meaning, normal meaning of it means. But it is implicit as a metaphor, which means unnecessary, as noted in in the poem, that the war is an unnecessary murderous warring in the poem. Also, in the same line, we have the clause decapitated the epic of their lives. This contains two pieces of metaphor. The first one is the word decapitated. On the surface meaning of it means to cut off the head of human being. thereby transmitting to murder. And this is seen as murderous acts. That is the metaphor or the metaphorical instance of it. Then the phrase epic of their lives, which is the second metaphor as noted in that particular line. And that is what makes it extended metaphor. So epic of their lives on the surface means the brightest story points of the women's lives, whereas menfolk is that brightest story point for the women. That is, according to the poem, when they were around, the women folk of Sierra Leone were ever happy, not until their demise, as pertaining to the the poetic personas as it states in the poem. And also, this means that a man is the epic of woman's life. More so, we have another three metaphor instances combined, and this is thus an extended metaphor, upon which rests the assertion of the women folk of Sierra Leone that the Sierra Leonean Civil War was an unnecessary genocide on the men folk of Sierra Leone. So that is about the extended metaphor as seen in the poem. Another one is the case of irony. This is located in line 14 of the poem, thus, to celebrate their gains. It is an irony for the poet to describe the painful side effect of the war as gains. There's nothing to gain in that. In normal language use, the word that ought to be used is loss, not gains. So that is what makes the line an ironic use of a word. I hope this is clear. The next one is a metaphor. Mistakenly, I didn't remember to separate that. So it is not irony metaphor, but they are separate on the line. So the case of metaphor and a poem, the word lyric as used in line 3 of the poem is metaphorical. And this is meant to be used for pre-war civil era. That is the time or the era before war in Sierra Leone. And also the phrase forlorn field, as it occurs in line 4 of the poem, is a piece of metaphor as well, implying neglect of agricultural farms. Forlorn field. Field there is symbolizes to be farm. So the abandonment of the farmland is what is meant by forlorn field. And also the phrase epoch lost to antiquity, as seen in line 17 of the poem, is also a metaphor. And for the unquantifiable happiness of pre-Civil War era, which has now become history, is what is meant by the line epoch lost to antiquity. The something that cannot be measured, the happiness that cannot be measured that happened to the women of Sierra Leone when their husbands were around. And also the word song, as it is seen in line 2, is a metaphor as well for the Sierra Leonean women folks' empathy for their inability to give befitting burial to their men folk that lost their lives to the Civil War. The whole of line 24 gives a metaphor emphasizing a point that farmlands have been abandoned in post-war in Sierra Leone. So those are the instances of a metaphor as noted in the poem. The next one is a simile. Simile in the poem, we have it in line 1, and this is indirectly comparing the reminiscence of Sierra Leonean women folk over their lots of the side effect of the Sierra Leonean Civil War to bits of wood has been sculpted off from ongoing work of a sculpture in the land. That is, the women are just gradually putting behind the lots of the side effects of the Sierra Leonean Civil War. Both also in lines 21 and 23 worded almost in similar grammatical items. And these are two some simile, indirectly comparing the mass death of the men folk and those of the women folk in widowhood to ridiculously uncelebrated passing on. That is the simile or the cases of simile as we have in the poem. And next is symbolism. Symbolism. And the poem's title, The Word Song, is a piece of contrastive symbolism with which Umar Farouk Sese depicts the content of the worries the women folk of Sierra Leone are reminiscing over in the background of the old happy days before the Civil War. Also, in line 3, we have this song as well, which connotes symbolism for the old happy days before the Civil War. The song again, as it occurs in line 4, as a fading echo, which is implicit of a symbolism which connotes the destruction of the women folks era, which is described in line 3. And also the word time, as used in line 2, 4, 8, and 24, is another piece of symbolism which implies the Sierra Leonean Civil War, that is the time of the war. And lastly, we have the device Sinedoki. In the clause, curved the ankles of their souls, which is not possible for something to curve soul. And this word, ankles, and also another word, soul, signaled the Sinedoki, which implies the Civil War side effects of mass death of the men of Sierra Leone as it renders the women folk helpless. That is why the what? The curve anchors the soul. And you know, without soul in human body, nothing is left. So this is a carefully chosen words by the poet to showcase or to illustrate the pity for the women folk of Sierra Leone, saying, curved the ankles of their soul. The demise or the side effects of the war gives what? It renders the women folk helpless. That is what that line means as Sinodoki. This is how far we can go today in this lesson, and look forward to more videos to come, and precisely that is on the themes or the messages passed by the poet in the poem. Have a beautiful day ahead and always keep safe. Thank you.